Your partner just criticized how you loaded the dishwasher, and suddenly you're questioning your entire worth as a human being. Meanwhile, they're spiraling because they think the kitchen chaos means they're failing at life. Today, we're diving deep into the psychological underbelly of Alison Armstrong's Queen's Code, specifically how internal judges and self-doubt create the criticism cycles that can make or break relationships. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why criticism lands so hard, where it really comes from, and how to recognize the invisible forces shaping your most intimate conversations. So, let's start with something that might surprise people. This isn't really about the dishwasher at all, is it?
Not even close. According to the page content, what we're really looking at is something much deeper. Alison Armstrong's original Queen's Code premise was that women criticize men because they want things to be better. It comes from a desire for improvement. But the rest of the story, as this analysis puts it, begins with the internal pressure many women carry long before any relationship even starts.
Internal pressure? What kind of pressure are we talking about?
The page describes it as an internal judge, this harsh, demanding inner voice that sets impossible standards. Many women grow up hearing messages that they must be competent, responsible, aware, and on top of everything. Their value becomes tied to how well organized they are, how effectively they prevent mishaps.
So it's like having a really mean boss living in your head 24/7?
Exactly. And here's the kicker. This internal judge can question how they manage life, how well they anticipate needs. Over time, it creates what the page calls a standard no one could ever meet. It tells them they should always be doing more, knowing more, being more.
That sounds exhausting. But how does this connect to relationship criticism?
Well, the page asks a crucial question. Is the criticism he hears sometimes the overflow of the criticism she directs at herself? When that internal judge is active, the pressure doesn't stay contained. It spills outward.
Oh, wow. So when she's criticizing him about the dishes, she might actually be battling her own internal voice, saying she's failing as a partner?
The page suggests exactly that. It describes how a woman may see something that could be better, but the urgency she feels isn't really about the man or the moment. It's about the standard she feels she must live up to. If he doesn't step in the way she hopes, it feels like she's being left alone with a burden she already believes she's failing to carry.
This is making me think about that whole thing where guys say they're attracted to confident women. Is there a connection here?
Absolutely. The page explores this fascinating dynamic. According to Armstrong's observations over many years, men consistently name self-confidence as the most important quality they hope to find in a partner. But here's the twist. It might have less to do with personality traits and more to do with what the page calls inner climate.
Inner climate? That's an interesting way to put it.
The page suggests that a self-confident woman isn't as perturbed by her internal judge. She doesn't feel like she's living under an impossible standard or fighting that constant sense of falling short. And if she feels more settled inside herself, she's less likely to pull him into cycles of pressure, urgency, or inherited expectations.
So he feels safe with her because she feels safe inside herself?
That's exactly what the page suggests. It's not that confident women never ask for anything or never express frustration. It's that they're not constantly battling an internal war.
But let's talk about the other side of this equation. Why does criticism land so hard for men specifically?
This is where it gets really interesting. The page explains that criticism rarely lands as neutral information. Instead, it lands as meaning shaped by the inner voice that's already present. A man often hears two conversations at once, his partner's words and his own self-doubt.
His own self-doubt? So men have internal judges too?
Absolutely. The page describes how that inner voice doesn't usually name a trait, it names a fear. It whispers that he's falling short and sometimes goes deeper to question whether he's worthy at all. The outer criticism doesn't create the pain, it activates doubt that already lives inside him.
So it's like criticism hits a nerve that's already exposed.
Exactly. And here's what makes it even more intense. The page points out that this dynamic intensifies when the critic is his chosen partner. She's not simply another person in the room. She's someone he has allowed into his identity.
That's a powerful way to think about it. When you choose someone as a partner, you're essentially giving them access to your emotional core.
The page describes it as intertwined inner worlds. When two people choose each other, their inner worlds can become deeply intertwined. Her words can carry more weight than she intends because feedback from a stranger often stays about behavior, but from someone deeply connected to him, it can feel like identity.
So that's why the same comment from a coworker might roll off his back, but from his partner it sends him into a spiral?
Precisely. The page explains that the reaction may appear disproportionate, but it's often shaped by the depth of the bond. And here's the really fascinating part. It works both ways.
How so?
Because she experiences him as part of her chosen life, her own self-judgment can extend toward him. The standards she applies to herself can quietly expand to include him. If she questions whether she is enough, that pressure can spill outward.
Wait, so her internal judge doesn't just affect how she sees herself, it affects how she sees him too?
The page suggests exactly that. Her internal judge is tied to her sense of identity, and because he's part of the life she's chosen, he becomes intertwined with that identity. His behavior can begin to feel like evidence about whether she's doing enough.
This is starting to paint a picture of why some relationship conflicts feel so intense. It's not really about the dishes or the laundry, it's about two people's deepest fears about their own worth colliding.
That's beautifully put. The page describes it as two forms of self-doubt meeting inside one conversation. Her internal standards move outward, his internal doubts flare inward. Without awareness, each partner may hear in the other the very fear they carry within themselves.
Let's get practical for a moment. The page mentions something about women noticing things men don't. How does this internal judge dynamic play into that?
This is where it gets really clear. The page explains that when someone grows up with the message that they're responsible for how everything looks, feels, and functions, their attention becomes trained to scan for what's out of place. Not because they want to be controlling, but because their nervous system has learned that being aware and preventing problems is how they stay safe, respected, or acceptable.
So it's like hypervigilance, but for household management?
The page actually uses that exact term, hypervigilance. And here's the key difference. When a woman sees something that's off, her mind often doesn't treat it as a small detail. It may register as a sign that she's slipping or failing at something she believes she should be managing.
While men often don't experience that same internal pressure, so they literally don't see the same things or attach the same meaning to them.
Exactly. The page gives a great example about clutter. What may look like a minor detail to him might feel like a sign of inadequacy to her. And when the list of things that need attention never ends, it creates overwhelm, not because she wants perfection for its own sake, but because the standard she feels held to seems impossible to meet.
You know what's interesting? The page mentions this thing about having company over. That seems like such a specific trigger.
Oh, that's such a perfect example of how this plays out in real life. The page describes that moment when company is coming over and the pressure rises to make everything just right. There's often frustration with a husband or boyfriend for not helping or not doing things well enough. But the question is it really the guest's judgment that's at play, or the voice of an inner judge that's never satisfied?
So she's not actually worried about what the guests will think, she's worried about what her internal judge will think?
The page suggests that's often the case. And when that internal judge is active, the pressure spills outward. She sees things that could be better, senses things that could be improved, but the urgency isn't really about the moment, it's about the impossible standard she feels she must live up to.
This is making me think about something deeper. The page talks about worthiness questions. What does that mean?
The page describes this as the deeper, often unspoken fear, am I enough? For many women, that standard was shaped early through messages about who they needed to be loved, accepted, or respected. Over time, those messages settle into persistent questions. Am I worthy of love? Am I worthy of acceptance? Am I worthy of respect?
And that inner judge is basically screaming, am I not good enough? Am I not worthy?
That's exactly what the page suggests. And here's what's crucial. Beneath both patterns sits this deeper concern about worth. Many forms of self-judgment rest on that unspoken question. When that question lives inside both partners, criticism can press directly on it.
So he might shut down to avoid confirming his fears, while she might intensify to relieve her own internal pressure?
Precisely. The page describes it as a cycle where he shuts down to avoid confirming his worst fears about himself, while she intensifies because she's trying to manage her own internal pressure. Neither person is trying to hurt the other, but they're both responding to their own internal battles.
This feels like it could be really helpful for people to understand, but I'm curious, does this apply to everyone? Are we talking about universal patterns here?
The page is careful to note that these patterns are common but not universal. It describes tendencies shaped by socialization, early experiences, and relational dynamics, not fixed traits or gender absolutes. The FAQ section specifically addresses this, saying it's not claiming all women have an internal judge and all men struggle with worthiness.
That's important to clarify. So what can people actually do with this information? How do you use this insight in real relationships?
The page suggests recognizing that criticism often reflects internal pressure rather than relational failure. Partners can slow down, name what's happening inside, and respond to each other's fears rather than reacting to the surface behavior.
So instead of getting defensive about the dishwasher comment, you might say something like, "It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed right now."
That's a great example. And the page emphasizes that understanding this doesn't excuse hurtful criticism, it simply reveals the emotional forces underneath so partners can respond with clarity rather than defensiveness or shame.
You know what strikes me about all this? It's not about blame at all. The page seems really careful to avoid pointing fingers.
Absolutely. The FAQ section specifically addresses this. It's not blaming women for criticism in relationships. It's providing context. It shows how men carry their own internal doubts too, which shape how criticism lands. The goal is compassion for both partners, not assigning fault.
And it actually builds on Armstrong's original work rather than contradicting it, right?
Exactly. The page explains that Armstrong's insight about women wanting things to be better still holds. But this adds a deeper layer. Many women also carry internal standards they never chose. The two ideas complement each other. One describes the behavior, the other explores the emotional roots.
So when you step back from all this, what we're really talking about is how our deepest fears about ourselves show up in our closest relationships. The criticism isn't really about the dishes or the laundry or whether someone remembered to take out the trash.
That's beautifully summarized. We're talking about how internal judges and self-doubt create these invisible forces that shape every interaction. When you understand that your partner's criticism might be the overflow of their own harsh self-judgment, and that your reaction might be your own worthiness fears getting activated, everything changes.
It's like having a roadmap for those moments when conversations suddenly feel way bigger than they should. Instead of wondering why your partner is being crazy or why you're overreacting, you can recognize these deeper patterns at play.
And that recognition creates space for something different. Instead of two people defending against each other's fears, you can actually address what's really happening underneath. That's where real intimacy becomes possible.
Here's what I want you to remember from today's conversation. The next time criticism lands hard in your relationship, whether you're giving it or receiving it, pause and ask yourself, whose internal judge is really talking right now? Because understanding the psychological forces behind our most difficult moments isn't just academic. It's the key to breaking cycles that keep couples stuck and creating the kind of emotional safety where love can actually flourish.